Now, a great friend of the show and regular guest and imparter of humour and wisdom is Sabrina Salvati, better known as the host of Sabby Sabs podcast. And she joins us again now. Sabrina, thanks for being here tonight. I don't know if you heard my introduction, but I was effectively saying that Donald Trump's made a very poor start to the course this year. He's going to have to try harder. Is that a feeling you identify with?
100%. I mean, if we look at Gaza right now, we can tell that obviously Donald Trump is working in Benjamin Netanyahu's favor, which I think many of us predicted would happen anyway. But his outreach to Egypt and to Jordan and to ask them to take the Palestinian people from Gaza, it all just leads to what many of us have predicted all along, which is that this is a land grab, not just for Israel, but possibly could be for Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who's also interested in the Gaza coastline because of the resources there. I've seen multiple pictures where Israel has shown that they want to develop the Gaza Strip into a resort-style location. So this was never really about Hamas, which I continued to tell people before. If they were really trying to get Hamas, they knew Hamas was in the tunnels, they would have gone into the tunnels. It was about cleansing the land. They want the land and they want the Palestinian people gone. He has also lifted the ban that Joe Biden had against the 2,000-pound bombs to Israel. He lifted that ban. So I think that's a clear message to people there. And in the case of Russia and Ukraine, he did claim that he would end this war, I think like the first week of his presidency or maybe even the first day. And obviously that has not happened. So when it comes to foreign policy, Donald Trump seems to be dragging his feet a little bit when you compare it to the promises that he made to his supporters.
And he's now picked new enemies in Latin America. On top of Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, he's now picked on Mexico and Colombia.
That's right. And I do want to give a warning to people about these sanctions. Number one, I'm against economic sanctions, and you should be as well, not just because it hurts the people in those countries, but also this will have an impact on our economy here in the United States. Every time they put sanctions on these countries like Mexico, which is a country where we get a lot of our auto parts from, I'm not sure if everyone's aware of that, but sanctions on Mexico, sanctions on Colombia, that means that prices here in the United States are going to increase, right? So one of the big concern from voters here is that the prices were too high. Eggs were too high, and other grocery products were too high. And all of us have been experiencing that. And that's why some people voted for Donald Trump, because he said that he would fix the prices and he would get this turned around. The reality is, folks, as long as he is putting sanctions on countries where we actually do get products from, that means that the prices are going to increase. I was just at the grocery store the other day and I did see that the egg prices are increasing again. So this was a big top concern from people, was the economy, and sanctions are never good for that country or for us as well. So people need to get prepared for that.
Yes, indeed. Now, just going back to Palestine for a moment, I've just seen in the last couple of minutes that Israel has told UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, to clear out of East Jerusalem by the end of the month, and has withdrawn all licenses and permissions for UNRWA to operate anywhere in the occupied territories. This is a clear, blatant breach of international law. Every country that is a signatory to the various international laws and conventions dealing with occupied territory is required to allow the United Nations relief work to continue. Israel has now peremptorily booted them out. Now, in a sane world, Israel would be booted out of the United Nations for that crime, if for no other. But it's unlikely that Donald Trump, on current form, is going to do anything about that either.
That's correct. And this would have happened with Kamala Harris as well. This is what I want people to understand. This is why there were many of us in the US that did vote third party and didn't support either one of these parties. Both of these parties, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they both answer to AIPAC, which is a lobby interest group here, probably one of the top lobby interest groups. A lot of our Congress members do take money from AIPAC. So they're working for Israel. They're not working for the American people. Israel has not been held accountable. That's part of the reason why, is because of the lobby interest groups. But also, we have these entities like the ICC and the ICJ, which have condemned some of the crimes that Israel has done, but there's nothing in place from those institutions that actually enforces what they have said is wrong. So they can't enforce Israel to stop doing what they're doing. And that's where I believe the other part of the UN comes in, the Security Council. This is where you see all the time that the representative from the United States, Ambassador Linda Greenfield, she's the one that raises her hand to stop it, to stop the accountability. So the United States government has continued to fund Israel regardless. Before October 7th, they've been funding Israel. They continue to fund them so that in Israel, everybody has health care. We don't have health care here in this country. Everybody doesn't have it. In Israel, you can go to college for free. You can't go to college for free in the United States. They are willing to do whatever they can to help Israel, even if that means that Americans here will not get those benefits and will suffer. So what we have here is a full hostage situation where these lobby interest groups like AIPAC and J Street have such a hold over our political space. And that is why these things are not being done the way that they should be. This is why Israel is not fully being held accountable. So people really have to follow the money here. Even though we may have some representatives that don't take money from AIPAC, it doesn't matter in the end because the party as a whole does. And that's how we get here. So no one's going to hold Benjamin Netanyahu accountable or Israel accountable until we get corporate money out of electoral politics.
Now, it's an ill wind that blows nobody any good, and at least it's blowing fair for the big tech bros. I don't know how many hundreds of billions of taxpayers' money is about to be given to them for a new generation of AI, which China has just left at the starting blocks before it's even got off the mark. What's people's feeling about that?
I think there are some concerns here in the US about AI. More people are, I would say a couple years ago, people were a little bit more curious about it, but I think more people are afraid of it now because of some of the concerns surrounding AI. We have been warned also about open AI. People are worried that they may lose their jobs to AI. This is another thing that's been brought up. But I think at the end of the day, this comes down to an oligarchy that we have in this country where there is a war against the 99% of us. And that is the billionaire class. These billionaires have basically decided how we are going to live our lives, what benefits we are going to have in this country. And as long as we have that oligarchy, I don't really see things changing for the 99%. This is where something like Occupy Wall Street was actually a really good idea because they understood that. They understood that it's the bankers. They understood that it's the billionaires that are not having our best interests in mind. And they have a full scale like war, economic war against the 99%, against the working class in this country. I think what we will have to change things is there is going to have to be a worker movement, which I know that Jill Stein and Shama Sawant are working on that now, a worker movement. And they have a conference in February to kick that off because we've tried this through the political parties. We had progressive candidates go into the Democratic Party to try to fight back with inside the party. Didn't work because the party belongs to Wall Street and the military industrial complex. I think some people tried that with the Republican Party, with the Freedom Caucus. You see Matt Gaetz is gone, et cetera. So the reality is the billionaires are controlling a lot of interest in this country and also in other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's bound to be the case that there begins to be pushback from the blue-collar, working class, make America great again, America first, working class represented in a very incoherent and often obscenely wrong way by people like Steve Bannon. There's no obvious connection between the politics of Bannon and the politics of Elon Musk, for example.
Correct. I mean, at the end of the day, I think when you look at someone like Elon Musk, he's going to look out for his class, right? So he's a billionaire. He's going to make sure that his interests are protected. And this is something that I wish that both people or people on both sides of the political aisle would fully understand, that at the end of the day, regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican, there is one group that's against the majority of us, and that's the billionaire class. And they are the ones that are calling the shots. So yeah, it's a problem to have a president that's a billionaire. And I've sounded the alarm about this before. It's a problem to have Elon Musk a part of Trump's administration. He's also another billionaire. But make no mistake, while the Democrats are telling you that we have an oligarchy that's forming in this country, the oligarchy has been here for years. And the Democratic Party also happily takes money from that same oligarchy. So we have to be very clear that we send the message that both of these political parties support the billionaire class. It was one candidate that we saw in 2016 and 2020, and that was Bernie Sanders, who said we have to fight back against the billionaire class. And you see the Democratic Party didn't want that to happen then. So at the end of the day, that's who they answer to. This is why they are very weak when it comes to Israel. They'll say a little bit to make you think that they care somewhat about the Palestinian people. They don't. They're all in on this. They all know that this was going to be a land grab. They all knew what Israel was doing, and they all decided to go along with the parties that support that interest because they're all bought off at the end of the day.
What of the Democratic Party now? Black people in America have historically identified with it, at least for 100 years or so, maybe a little less. Not so much when the Democrats represented the slave owners. But the trend seems definitely to be that the minority ethnic communities are abandoning the Democratic Party. What remains of the union movement, blue-collar workers, organized workers, has already abandoned it. It just leaves the political class, the candidates and their families and their staff in many parts of the country. Can they renovate themselves, or are they for the trash can of history?
I think the question is, do they want to do that? I don't think the party as a whole wants to do that. I think there are certain members that are a part of the Democratic Party that do want a working class agenda and do want to help the 99%. But the Democrat leadership doesn't want that, and their donors don't want that. So that's the unfortunate part. I do think that we are seeing a lot of change. This election with Kamala Harris, we did see that Kamala Harris did lose the black vote. Regardless of what corporate media tells you, the numbers will show that, yes, black women heavily came out to support Kamala Harris, but black men did not. So when you put both of those numbers together, you will see that black people heavily did not come out the way that they did for Barack Obama. This has been a trend since Obama 2012. Hillary Clinton lost some of that support. Biden lost some of that support. And now Kamala has lost even more. It's continuing to decline overall. And what is happening is not so much that black voters as a whole are going to the Republican Party. Some are, but most are not. Most are choosing to stay home. There were about 8 million voters that voted for Joe Biden that did not turn out to vote for Kamala Harris. The Democratic Party cannot win in the United States without the black vote. So there is frustration on that front. You see a little bit different with the Latino vote. The Latino voters, there was a shift over towards Donald Trump where he was able to capture the Latino vote. But for black voters, I think a lot of us are just tired, and we don't feel, I would say older black voters are more likely to come out and support the Democratic Party. Younger black voters are more willing to support third party alternatives or just sit the entire election out. And that's what we've been warning people about for years. And it took Kamala Harris's campaign for that to really be brought forward in the spotlight. But I don't think the Democratic Party really wants to change. I think they're just going to go with what the donor
Yeah,
class wants them to do.
That's the $64,000 question, as we used to call it, when that was more money than it is now. Sabrina Salvati, host of the Sabby Sabs podcast, co-host of Revolutionary Blackout Network. Thanks for joining us on the show tonight.